What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of our review of The Wheel of Time Season 1. Today we're going to be looking at episode 2. If this is your first time here, I encourage you to go back and watch our review of episode 1. We have seen the whole season. This isn't like an initial review. This is just us rewatching and giving you our thoughts. My name is Chip.
This is Brittany.
Last episode, we were a little free-form. We've got a little bit of a format change here, so we're going to be a little bit more organized this time. And we're going to start with that cold open. What did you think of it?
I thought the cold open was pretty good. I really love whoever that actor is that plays the White Cloak, Children of the Light guy. I mean, probably one of the best, obviously just like a sub character, but like just so brilliantly plays this character. He is like pristine and his teeth are so white and it's like he just looks so good, but he's so kind of crazy and you kind of get that like from the beginning. One of my favorite quotes from him in that cold open was, "Brutality is the only part to mercy." I mean, he just knocks it out of the park. So good. Not my favorite cold open of the series, but certainly just defines that character and that group, I think, really well.
Definitely much stronger than the first cold open, I will say. But from a book reader's perspective, you know, when we meet the White Cloaks in the book, you just kind of hear about them. You don't really see anything. You just, they're in the same town as you. You better not get in their way. And then, you know, Rand has a little bit of a confrontation with them, but you don't really understand them till later in the series. And the way they introduced them, I think, was perfect. Like, it creates this kind of, you know, who the hell are these people? It's a good, you know, antagonist to have, and especially with the way they opened it, where he takes the ring off the severed hand.
And he eats the bird.
And it's like bleeding in his mouth. I mean, really, really strong open. And that leads us into the first time we get to see the title sequence, which I think is absolutely unbelievable. You know, it's the weaving of the pattern, and at the very end, it shows all the different Ajas. And I mean, I thought in terms of like title sequences, I think Game of Thrones kind of set that bar, and I think that this Wheel of Time one, for a person who's read the books and understands what they're making, I think it's awesome.
So I have to say something really quick after seeing the whole series. I think the challenge that this show has is being compared to Game of Thrones, and I think they're just two totally separate types of fantasy. But I think Game of Thrones definitely sets that bar really, really high on everything. And that opening is really good. And I like that you can skip it. It's not like you have to watch it, but it's beautiful. And it's a good watch, definitely, since we're seeing it for the first time. I don't know if it'll change into season 2. So we'll be on the lookout for that. And
so that leads us into the next part of the video, where we're going to just discuss the different plot points of the show. So after the intro, we are now joining our characters and we're on the run from the Trollocs, and they ultimately end up at Taren Ferry, which again is a scene from the books, and it's, I think, relatively well done. But, you know, the view of the Trollocs in this episode definitely took a downgrade, in my opinion. They just relied on the CGI, and again, I get it. And, you know, you can't have practical Trollocs running all through the forest and stuff, but just didn't look that great. It looked like they could have spent a little bit more time on that, you know, making it look a little cooler. But the scene with the ferry, I think, was relatively faithful up until the very end when the guy jumps in and kills himself. I just didn't think, I thought that was kind of ridiculous. I don't know why they did that. It's not in the book. It's not even close to anything, but I guess it sets up their distrust of Moiraine. I don't know. What did you think?
I thought, again, I'm going to go back to this idea that everything's a little rushed. I thought them leaving the town, it was like, bye, everybody. And it was just like, we're on the run. The Trollocs have now caught up, and they are right behind us. We have to, this man is saying, I can't leave without my son. He either has to go with them or he can't go back to the Trollocs or he's going to die. There's all these different things. And again, it's a little fast, but he jumps in and he ends up killing himself / kind of being killed by Moiraine in a weird way, which does set up some conversations of Rand being very mistrustful. I think mostly Rand being very mistrustful of Moiraine. And Perrin and Matt are kind of like, kind of had to do what we had to do sort of thing. So I think that that's definitely being built there.
Yeah, and it definitely flowed naturally into the next scene, which is Moiraine with Egwane, and she's like teaching her about the one power. And I thought, from a book reader's perspective, this is probably the best way to explain the base level knowledge of what you need with the Aes Sedai, the three oaths, how they can't kill people, they can't lie, and they can't make weapons of the one power or whatever. I think that was really well done. Most of the time those exposition dumps can be kind of clunky, but it fit really well. And the scene where she teaches her how to channel, that's like literally straight from the book, like exactly how I pictured it in my mind. They're sitting there, the little gem bleeps, and then she gets the last one. It was perfect.
I agree. I think that was a great moment for me as a non-book reader because you did really get to see, you kind of learn more about what Aes Sedai is, and again with the three oaths, but you also get to see that wheeling of the power and knowing about the one true source. And there was a quote that I loved, when she tells Egwane, "You don't listen to the wind listens to you." Is that from the book?
I don't think so, but I was like, damn.
I love that because I think the idea that there's all these women across this, what we're finding out is a bigger world, that they all have different versions of this. There are women throughout all of these places that can wield this power, and it's called different things, but it's all the same thing at the end of the day. It's all the one source. And so that was kind of an interesting, I think, non-book reader kind of thing where you're like, okay, like, what is this all about? You're intrigued. You want to go further, and you love seeing Egwane have this moment.
And I think that, really what you just said, I think that that's the value of having this discussion between a person who's read it and who hasn't, because it's interesting to see your interpretation of it, which is accurate. There are, as you'll find out later, there are different groups of women that have powers that, they just aren't Aes Sedai, and they all call it different things. So that to me, I'm impressed that a non-book reader is getting that from the show just in episode 2. That to me shows that the people who are doing the show know what the hell they're doing.
I think so. I think and at times things can be clunky, but I think that was really well done. It really was nice and fun to see as a non-book reader. So yeah, I liked that part. I thought it was good.
Yeah, and so then that leads us into Rand having a dream, which we soon find out that they all had the same dream.
Right.
But I think Rand's was different in that he pulled the bat out of his mouth, and they all were saying that they just saw him flying with their necks breaking, right?
Right.
So I think that was a little tweak there that they put in there, because in the book they all see the same thing every time.
Yeah, it's a little hard to watch, not gonna lie, but it's interesting, and it was kind of fascinating to see that all of them had the same dream. So that was good. I thought that was an interesting way to show that they are sort of something is coming after them as a group, and we're not sure why. I think that was great.
But yeah, then that leads us right into where Rand confronts Moiraine, and I thought that this was a really good scene because it shows his frustration. Like I think he's starting to think that he is the dragon, or at least, confront that possibility. And he's lashing out towards Moiraine because she's being secretive but
also Egwane too.
Egwane too. He's definitely got it in for Egwane now that she didn't choose him. He's, really lashing out there. But, I thought that was a great scene in terms of, setting up that conflict between him and Moiraine.
Right. And I actually really loved how Matt was sort of the voice of reason. So Egwane and Rand have gotten into this fight kind of, and Perrin's sort of like going with the flow, and Matt's like, "You're being an ass." That's what he says. He says, "You're being an ass." He said, "We've got each other, and that's like basically it. And Moiraine's keeping us alive." And basically he says, like, we don't really know why she's keeping us alive, so we just got to roll with it, kind of thing. But, I liked that moment where, like, Matt, who's sort of the kind of, I guess you can assume, like, more of the flaky one, I guess, to everybody. And he's sort of this, like, voice of reason. But Matt and Perrin are probably the most homesick to me and have the most kind of left behind, where Matt has his like family and sisters who he loves dearly left behind, and Perrin sort of has unfinished business. Like he hasn't really dealt with things that he's left behind, and I think they're the most homesick. So for them to be like, Rand, like we have to go, was interesting to me. The next part is we officially meet the White Cloaks. And what did you think of that?
I thought that scene was so well done. I mean, especially how they're rolling up on them, and she's like gives her ring to Lan and tells them all to be like cool, like yo, be cool, be cool. But again, like this is I think where a book reader is going to get a lot more out of this scene than a non-book reader, because the way that the Lord Captain rolls up, and first of all, hold on, before we even get into that, their uniforms are freaking sick. I mean, whoever did a really great job. Whoever did costume design, you give this person whatever award that they get. Like the outfits, the shoulder piece that kind of denotes their rank, which is, I mean, it's just perfect. It's so cool. So the Lord Captain, I thought was portrayed perfectly. He's kind of like a measured dude, which as most White Cloaks are. They're just trying to live in the light. And he sees these people on the road, accepts what they say, and is like, okay. But then the questioner rolls up and he's like, let me do some questioning. And that, right. I mean, again, in that distinction, again, maybe they'll go into it deeper in the show later, but as a person who's read all the books and knows who these people are and how it is, I mean, it was portrayed perfectly. So I was very happy to see the way that I imagined they would be is exactly how they were portrayed.
I think there's just a level of using like real world things in the way that they portray like some of the outfits and things like that. Like I really love that. And you can actually, if you watch like Amazon Prime has a couple of videos on like how they've made things, and they're really interesting and fascinating. And it was really nice to learn about like how they came up with some of the outfit choices. But the White Cloaks are just amazing.
In terms of, setting up the White Cloaks as an antagonist, I thought it couldn't be better, because you did see the distinction between the guy who's the questioner and his demeanor versus the normal type of children, the guys who are just like, we'll go help the Trollocs. There's Trollocs, we'll go fight them,
Right. And then the other guy's like, we don't do that. Like, we're not doing that. We're here to like take down some Aes Sedai. I also love that he like carries the rings of the Aes Sedai that he's killed like on his belt buckle. Like he's
flaunting.
I mean, the character is just so good, and every part of that was really good. I did enjoy that.
Yeah, and then so then we get a very unique scene that I promise you I don't think a lot of shows could have really pulled off. It was literally 5 minutes of storytelling and watching our characters just ride on a horse, and yet. It is a great scene. I know, without
like actually going to like, and another way that they could have done it is maybe like go to the past, like have characters that are playing the story out. Maybe it could have been cool, but it really does get to you. And if you sit down and watch it and you're watching really carefully, you can hear the whole story. But I should preface by saying, or I should add, that if you have not watched the anime cartoon, what are we calling those?
They're like supplements to the show. Yeah.
Yes. So like if you go to like extras and you watch these things, if you are not watching those, you are missing out. They are probably, I would say, very on par, if not like in some cases, like better telling of the story, and they're so well done. You can also get that same story
with visuals, and they are fabulous. But I thought it was great. You're right. Like they really needed to do that, because there was like, why are these guys like, what is it? What does that mean that they're 4 guys from this town? Like what matters? And I wish, that's another, you bring up a good point. I wish they would kind of explain what ta'veren is and what that means. In the book, they do a pretty good job of explaining why these people are important, and they just haven't done that yet in the show, at least in episode 2. Right. I mean, they told about that battle. Yeah, but the reason that these 4 people are important is that the pattern is supposed to weave around them, but we don't really know that based on the show. So they did mention, there's ta'veren in the 2 rivers, as she says in the first episode. Right. But they still haven't really explained that. So I would love to see that. We did get the world building, which I liked. And again, the fact that they were able to just film them sitting on horses and talking, and it actually worked. And I like that the story is so old that
the kids singing this song about the story have no idea
They don't even know what it is.
history is.
Yeah.
Like, just imagine that. That is so just incredible and kind of really cool and very much like a world building thing for me.
So then we have a little foreshadowing with Perrin and the wolves. Not a whole lot to digest there, but it was pretty
he
cool.
the wolves come up and he licks them.
Yeah.
And don't really know. And they don't really explain that in the season. So
Right. I guess they're going to save that for later, but, it is foreshadowing. And it was, a cool scene. Finally leads us to our last point where they enter, as they call it, Shadar Logath, which I hate. I hate the way they pronounce that. When you listen to the audiobook, it's Shadar Logath, and I prefer that. Just and it's the same way when they pronounce
it's different when
Tarvalin.
it's a little Britishy.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. I'm sure they have their reasons for doing so. But yeah, so we get a good scene with Matt and Perrin. I thought that was good character development. For all the character development we didn't get in episode 1, I thought they did a good job of kind of making it up here.
Right. Again, I'm a little thirsty for it. So it's like these moments, they're so short. But my favorite quote from that is Matt gives Perrin this knife that Layla, the wife that Perrin had killed, nobody knows that he's killed her yet, but only Perrin does. And he says, she made this for me and said it was only meant to kill someone for someone you love. And he said she always thought that would be you, that I would kill, that basically Matt would kill for Perrin. And then Perrin says, your sisters are going to be okay. My parents will come and check on them. Like, they won't be alone. And I think it was just that moment where, basically these two people are like holding each other's hands like through this thing. And also I believe that they're the most homesick.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think Matt carried that scene big time. I mean, it makes me sad that they had to recast that guy. Like, every time I see him, it just makes me so much more sad.
And also my favorite is when they get to Shadar Logath. Lan's like telling the story and he's like, this story about how Shadar Logath was a town full of people who shut off from the world, and basically when people came to find them, they were just like nobody was there. Like, their evil had been like eaten up or whatever. And Matt, my favorite thing, Matt being the funniest, was like, so, longest you've ever spoken, and why did you bring us here?
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
I loved that. That was a great, Matt, it's just, he nailed it.
And then, the darkness comes along, which I thought, in terms of the way I imagined it in my head, I thought of it more as a smoky cloud. I thought the way they did it on the show was cool, too, and the way that it killed that horse. Snake-like. Yeah, the way that it killed that horse and it showed its power right away, I thought was really awesome. My only issue with that whole scene is that, they get separated and it seems like they all end up in the same river, like right on the same side of the castle, and they can't find each other. Like, I don't understand.
Well, I mean, I guess not, because, Moiraine and Lan end up in the woods.
Well, they end up in the woods, right. But the four, you have Egwane and Perrin jump off, and then, right around the side.
You have to imagine that, though, this is like a city, so it's not like a small thing.
But it wasn't surrounded by water, though, so it had to only have water on one side. So it's like you're in the same river. Like, how do you not find each other afterwards?
Well, they can't. That's the moral of the story, is that they can't. Also, I think it's a little, and maybe this is just some of the dark, Matt gets woken up from his dream, so he's just given away his knife to Perrin. And then all of a sudden, a knife in the city is found. And that's what kind of awakes the evil. Either something's following them or knows what they're doing or whatever.
And, again, one of those things you only pick up when you've watched it multiple times is that whistling that precedes the darkness showing up and precedes Matt going to find the dagger, which, again, is setting up points down the line. We're not going to spoil that here. And then the show ends with a freaking bang, with Nynaeve putting the sword to Lan's throat. And I was like, damn. And then it just goes to black right after that. It's like, she's like, show me my friends or I'm going to kill you.
Right.
Blam. Cut to black. Awesome way to end it. Made me want episode 3. You know what I mean? I
agree. I thought that was great. Nynaeve's probably one of my favorite characters, and I'll get into that probably next episode. But I think overall, my positives, I think this is a great episode. Overall, I think it hit a lot of things pretty well. It wasn't overly clunky. There were parts like the guy dying was a little bit much for me, but I think my most negative thing, and I don't know, this might be a controversy, is the Rand and Egwane Moiraine saga. Like, it's a little, like, I get that they're 20, so, like, it's very common for, like, imagine being, like, a sophomore in college and, like, having a relationship. It's always, like, a little dramatic. So I get it, but it's kind of a lot. Very, like, up and down. Like, I know they have a lot going on. I'm not trying to say that, but it's, like, kind of a lot.
Well, it just comes back to the lack of depth of character development for the two of them, right? Like, we know who they kind of are as people individually, but we haven't really seen much of them together. Like, we don't know the history of their relationship. How long have they been together? I don't know. You know, like,
right.
You know, so the fact that Rand, like, as soon as she made her decision to be the wisdom and now, oh, I can't have a husband or have kids, he, like, flipped 180 real quick and is acting
I would say, like,
real
overall,
petty.
like, Rand's kind of like brattiness is a lot, and maybe that's in the book. I don't know. Yeah, he's definitely like popping off like all over the place. And
super petty.
A little bit petty. But I mean, who knows? I mean, I like Rand's character overall, but his brattiness is a little bit much in this particular episode. And he's kind of like just picking at Egwane for some reason, I guess because she's going to go off and be this Aes Sedai and like have this other world without him. Having a hard time with that. I think he's having a hard time with a lot of things. But those were just like my negatives. I wouldn't even call them negatives because like characters are not always going to be in their best state of mind as they're leaving their home and all their boyhood dreams behind.
Yeah, so for me, character-wise, I think this episode definitely gets a plus. We get a lot more building between the characters. We get good exposition. And for me, the only real cons in this episode, like you said, with the guy dying, I thought was a little strange. But the really only negative I have is just when the Trollocs are running through the forest. I mean, it looks silly to me.
See, I hear this. Okay. I have listened to various like YouTubers and stuff like that. And like I hear this. I mean, I guess like if you had to really like pull it out of me, but I don't necessarily see them as being like bad CGI, but I don't really know.
Well, it's not
being, like,
bad.
monsters.
I wouldn't say it's bad. It's definitely not bad. It's better than most. And it could be a lot worse. I just, it's not to the level where you would expect if they're spending $10 million an episode. That's what I think.
Right.
I just think that you give them a little bit more time to polish it. That's what I think is like give them a little bit more time to polish it. Maybe it turns out looking better because it doesn't look bad. It really doesn't. It's just, it's something that kind of when you first see it, it kind of takes you out of the experience a little bit. So that to me is the really only negative. How would you score this episode overall on the scale of 1 to 10?
I would say like I'm keeping between like a 7 and 8. Like I think it's a great show. I don't want to take away from it. I think it's great. I think it's on its way. It's not like a 10 out of 10, but it's there. It's a 7, 8. Like I'm totally invested in the next episode. Like I'm excited for the things I'm going to learn about this world for sure, but it's not like blowing me away yet.
Yeah. So for me, I would give this episode like a 7.9. So first episode was 7.3. This episode 7.9.
Yeah, it's definitely a little.
It's an upgrade, and I would say the majority of that upgrade comes from the White Cloaks. That's what it was for me. I mean, that kind of put it over the edge in terms of the last episode.
I would say too, that's a good score because there was a lot covered in this episode, kind of like the first, but done a little bit better. Like, it's not as clunky. Like, I love the first episode, don't get me wrong. And I think it was good, but it was clunky. Like, there were moments where you're just, like, really needed a little bit more of this and a little, you know what I mean? This one was a little bit more smooth while also giving a lot of detail.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. That was episode 2, and we will be back with another video next time looking at episode 3. So be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and we'll check you later.
See you later.